You're listening to NeoTalk, the official podcast of the Faculty of Modern Languages at the University of Warsaw. My name is Maria Łusakowska.
And I'm Ola Szczęsna. Today's episode is a very special one. We had the pleasure of speaking with Françoise Vergès, activist, public educator, and also author of A Decolonial Feminism, which is recently translated into Polish and published with Wydawnictwo Współbycie. She visited us on the occasion of the Humanities Society Identity Congress, where she was one of the two keynote speakers.
Yes, and of course, when we were preparing for this conversation, we both read this book. And I think what really caught our attention while reading it was how radically it reframes feminism. So not as a universal project, but as something deeply entangled with colonial history, racial capitalism, state power, and everyday forms of exploitation.
And what really came through in our conversation is how many different factors shape feminist struggles, and also how often we don't even notice them. So things like the ways Europe benefits from the heritage of colonial imperialism. Françoise Vergès is very vocal about this, and the blissful ignorance of Western feminism towards the woman in the global south.
This reminds me of a very powerful quote from hers that is also very famous, when she talks about the invisibility of women working in the cleaning sector. And she shows us that behind this Western myth of independence and individuality stand whole invisible groups of people, usually people of color, who make our daily lives possible. She also emphasizes that decolonial feminism is not just a theory, but also a practice. So we asked her about emotions, memory, optimism, and responsibility, especially in the European contexts that often prefer to forget their colonial legacies.
Yes, but it's also, I think, worth thinking about countries like Poland, where there is officially no colonial legacy, yet we still participate in some ways in this post-colonial world. We do benefit from that history. We also asked Vergès about it, about our Polish context.
So join us for a conversation about feminism, decolonization, and how to think and act differently in a world shaped by colonial histories.
We hope that you enjoy our conversation with the remarkable Professor Vergès. Welcome, Professor Vergès. Today's conversation will center around your book, recently translated in Polish as well. The book, A Decolonial Feminism. Fortunately, mainstream feminism has moved away from putting at its center white, middle class, let's say, a woman, and pays more attention to race and class also. Concepts such as Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality are currently widely used and also perceived as a crucial framework for feminist scholarship and also for feminist practice. However, Western feminism still has its blind spots that are necessary to address, I guess, such as heritage of colonial imperialism, from which it still benefits. So my first question would be, how does the colonial feminism rewrite the feminist fights towards emancipation? And also, could you explain us what is this famous decolonial feminism?
Well, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for your question. Okay, I will say that we still are in white bourgeois feminism, not necessarily, that person or that person, but we still live in a world extremely unequal, where the global south is still absolutely a site of extraction and exploitation and dispossession. Therefore, white women still benefit from that division of the world in which we still are. And white feminism very rarely reflect on the way in which it was affected by colonialism and imperialism. Because as I quite often say, the fact that it's focused on masculine domination by men, it forgets the place it has also in the world. If you were a bourgeois woman, you were not like a woman from even the working class, and even more so a woman from the African continent or from the Arab Muslim world or from Asia. And even men from these places also will not be the same than the white men. So most of the white feminism in Europe still think like that, despite also paying attention, as you were saying, with intersectionality, but in a way that sometimes it's a little artificial. It's kind of just saying it as if, but it's not acting upon it. It's performing about it. And decolonial feminism for me was to say, okay, first, it's feminism's plural, and we have to insist on that. Not all feminism are the same. And I don't deny to these bourgeois feminists to call themselves feminists if they wish. I'm not the police. But I say, okay, but your feminism is not mine. And my feminism, as I said, decolonial, is its aim. What it wants is the decolonization and the liberation of the whole society, not just of women. And I will start by the most exploited. And quite often the most exploited are women. But so it's not because then that it's become this kind of a vanguard of the revolution, because women can be also betray their own classes, if we say that. But in the fact that starting from the struggle of the most oppressed, if the most oppressed are free, then the world is free. So decolonial feminism is really about the decolonization of the world, not just a branch of feminism, but connected to the long struggle of decolonization and to the struggle of abolition of the of neoliberalism, racial capitalism, sexism, Islamophobia, all form of racism, anti-migrant, anti-refugee, anti-trans, anti-queer. So it's really take all the thing and look at different, and it try also to always look at the political economy of something, at what war is doing, what genocide is doing, what all this. So women are not outside of the world and not just taken as a group that is being oppressed by men. And to look at the way in which colonialism and imperialism, but even today racism, racialize even patriarchy. Will even racialize patriarchy. So you could be a tyrant at home, absolutely, hated by your wife and your daughter and even your son. But when you go out, you will be a black man or an Arab man or an Asian man. So you will not be equal to the white man. And which doesn't excuse the question of patriarchy, but ask us to be a little more rigorous in our analysis.
And we also want to ask you about the title of your book. I think you alluded to this a little bit, but we might miss it at first. And also, I would say that in Polish, there is no such difference grammatically. But the title of your book is A Decolonial Feminism, not The Decolonial Feminism. And in one of the interviews that I read with you, you said that people kept telling you about the decolonial feminism. So I understand that this was a conscious choice of yours. So could you explain why?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I wanted to say A Decolonial Feminism to also keep, many things I will say. First, the fact that a theory is dynamic. It's also answer to the conjuncture, to what's happening. So it's in the sense that is not once and for all what was being, say, in that moment. Second, I think that the is a really little also, how can I say, like an order, right? This is the feminism. No. And a decolonial feminism. So do we have a feminism that people can say, okay, I am a decolonial feminist, but because of the situation in which I am, this will be my first struggle or my priorities or the most important things for me. So in a way, it was to insist on the historicality of a notion and a theory, and avoid the rigidity or the fixation of things and the orthodoxy that that feminism will become an orthodoxy. I was like absolutely not pleased. Don't make it an orthodoxy. But yes, effectively, as I was saying, I do see that the desire, the need sometimes for a complete theory, something that will explain everything in the world, is still there. Because we have been trained into what will save us, and one thing will save us. And this is connected, with some form of monotheism or, like mono theory or monopatriarchy and mono, etc. And I say, no, we have also to try very strongly to resist that desire of something that will save us once and for all. Contradiction will still emerge, conflict will emerge, and things will evaluate. And what I have not seen at that time, because it was perhaps not there or was blind to that thing, that situation, that condition, will also perhaps make that theory change. Even though I do think that what I say in the book about, cleaning, that I will clean the world, remain for me really a basis, a foundation.
I just wanted to jump from that because what really struck me in your book was the fact that you express and see all of these interconnections, like between patriarchy and racial capitalism and, the Anthropocene and the Capitalocene and so on and so on. And it's like a never-ending nexus of, everything at once. And it's so... Yeah, I mean, it's very impressive, but also at the same time, I think I felt it very true when reading it, right? Because we tend to read these books about this one thing, right? Oppression of women, oppression of racialized people. And then, this is the time when we need to see that everything is actually connected.
Yeah, I mean, we are educated, and I don't think only in the West. I think everywhere. I mean, the school in which we enter when we are even very little, teach us to no longer to be curious. At what children are always asking, and we certainly did also when we were little. Why? How this work? Why? And at one point, stop asking questions. Stop asking. And the school is stop asking questions. You are trained to sit for hours in silence, and you are authorized to speak if you raise your hand and if the teacher say that you can answer. And so all this make a training even of the body and the senses that make us, in fact, becoming passive about the world around us. And we just see what we have been trained to see. And for me, was how do we untrain what we have been trained to? And sometimes we don't see what is even under our eyes. Or we see it, but we don't make anything about it. Or we see homeless people, but then why? So how do we denaturalize what has been naturalized? I often say the world around us has been made by social forces. So it couldn't be made otherwise. This is not, the earth going around the sun or, the day arrive and the night arrive. No, it's not about that. It's about social forces and how these social forces interact and interconnect to effectively justify, legitimize, naturalize oppression, dispossession, and exploitation, extraction. How we make it, we may feel, oh, that's sad, but not being pushed to action or whatever action it is. So that, effectively for me, it's like, did we pull all the thread that we needed to understand something, the mechanism that made that situation and that condition? Do we understand? And about women, we know that masculine domination will never be enough. It will not be enough. Perhaps even in a private setting, why is this man like that? What made a man a man? So what is it? And this can be changed. This is not destiny. This is not... So it's really, for me, the naturalization, but very, very pervasive, very wide. So
and subconscious.
So sometimes we can be indignant, but because also we have been trained to certain things, the children being killed or whatever. But then it stops at some kind of moral indignation and not about, okay, we have to act. We have to do something about it. So this is for me the interweaving of different things. So when I wrote about the forced abortion in Réunion Island in 1970, it had started in the mid-60s. This was a moment where thousands of women were marching the street of France to ask for, free access to abortion and to contraception.
For white women.
For white women and white bourgeois women. At the same time, 7,000 to 8,000 per year women were aborted and many were sterilized without consent. And my argument was that it's the same state that does the two policies. And we have to understand why the state is doing these two policies. Why here it criminalizes abortion and will send doctors and women to jail if they are accused. And here, doctor will perform 100 of abortion per day, and they will not be punished by the same state. And so we have to understand, again, what made that possible. And so not to look just, it's not just men doing it. Why effectively birth control became an arm of imperialism and racism. So again, of course, of the disciplining of women, that's, men, that's huge. The control of women's, of birth is a state policy for, for a century, 2 centuries, has become. So we have to understand, but we have to understand that within even the same society, some women will be encouraged to have children, and this woman will have access to daycare, to, toys for the children, and going to the museum, and she will be, effectively, she could effectively to go to the gym. She will be a good mom, whatever that means, And some children will never be children. Childhood will be forbidden to them, and motherhood will be forbidden. So if we don't understand all these things, we say we will see, and some of the feminists in France saw it just as something, that's happened in the colony. So that's too bad, of course, that's very sad, but it does not concern the question of abortion. And my argument was that if you had paid attention, perhaps your demand for abortion, which of course I agree with, I march also for that, will have been different. You will have much look at the question of effectively what is birth control and who want to control it and for what, rather than just my body, my choice. Because my body, my choice, even 2 years ago, I was in a debate with some young feminists and they were like, my body, my choice, and I want to do what I want with my body. And I want to have a child when I want. I say, fine, but your child will have access to daycare, will have access to vacation, to good school, to good health services, because having a child is not just like poop. I poop someone, outside in the world. We will want. So there was like some kind of totally egotistic dimension in that demand, which was presented as revolutionary. And I'm certainly not saying that women should not have fought for that, because as I say, I march also for that. But I know that is not when I want my body, my choice. That's not true. There is no my body. And the connection with the private property is my body. It's not your body, The state can intervene anytime it wants, on your body. And if it's a male body, it will send him, to war. Will we send him to jail? So to what extent are we free about our body, and to what extent this vocabulary of private property is influencing what seems to be radical and revolutionary?
And as we're speaking about imperialism and also this femo-imperialism, and also as we were speaking about those feminism in plural, in your book you criticize certain brands of feminism. So, for example, this feminism which stand for white supremacist or pro-capitalist interest. And I'm thinking of the political right in many Western countries, which uses some liberal feminist ideas to promote the conservative image of the perfect, of course, white woman as an ideal mother and also a woman. So could you tell us a bit more about this civilizational feminism, as you called, and also this problem of femo-imperialism?
Well, thank you. Yes, I was effectively, I wanted to say something about a feminism that has adopted the vocabulary of the civilizing mission. This is what I was, I call it civilizational, in the name of liberal rights, in the name of freeing women who are apparently, not free. And as Gayatri Spivak says, saving a brown woman from brown men. And that will be the duty and the beautiful duty of the white feminist. And as we know, it started also, not it started, but in our time, let's say in the second half of the 20th century and even, in the 21st century. It started even with this speech by Madame Bush, Jr., when she went to the United Nations and said, we have to go to Afghanistan because we have to save Afghan women. She said she had discovered the condition of Afghan women, and so she felt that she had to go, and suddenly, so many people did not even know about the burqas, never heard that word. And suddenly they were like, photo of women and of girls. And it became effectively, the representation of it pushed us to feel, of course, oh, that's terrible, or the poor little girl and they cannot go to school. And of course, the men had bear, and on top of it, they put, they dyed it. So what are these? They don't look like, like normal people. So the civilizing feminism was extremely important because also what I argue, it gave to imperialism and to capitalism argument that, capitalism and imperialism had fewer and fewer arguments, because people have seen that it had not brought so much happiness. Women's right was a perfect thing. Who is against women's rights, And of course, you will have the story of the little girl, 14-year-old, married to a 58-year-old man or things like that. So, of course, you will feel, and of course, civilizational feminism look absolutely fair, and having like the best argument. And it was bringing back again the old complicity of a certain European feminism with colonialism, imperialism, I have argued, they never reflected as if feminism was the only ideology in Europe that had not been touched by colonialism and imperialism. You had criticism of socialism, communism, Trotskyism, anarchism, different, even revolutionary ideology, and of course saying, oh, you're not a little, like a macho and things like that, And you were not a little colonial also. You don't think that you are, as Aimé Césaire said to the French communists, you think about brotherhood, but as long as you are the big brother, and that's not brotherhood, that's not fraternité. So it was that I would say, you never ask yourself, what has been your complicity? Because as if you were women, you were not complicit by what? By some kind of mysterious whatever, that does not work. And I brought effectively some proof of that complicity by every, great figure of feminism, important feminist, Republican, anti-monarchy and anti-absolutism, and we were for colonialism. And also this question, especially about Islam, especially a total, really, fixation by white feminists on Islam, that they have decided that Islam is by nature, bad for women and for girls. And so, in a way, even they could perhaps criticize perhaps the brutality of intervention, but they will justify the intervention. They have to intervene. Women have to be saved. And stop with this savior syndrome. Stop with that, First, take care of your own society already, Free, decolonize your society. Because if your society is free and decolonized, it will help women elsewhere. So you don't need that. I understand the narcissistic, satisfaction. Oh, I have done that, and now so many little girls in somewhere, some place, are going to school thanks to me. And but please, this is. You are not, in fact, addressing the condition that made for this little girl the impossibility of going to school. You're not looking at program of structural adjustment. You're not looking at armed intervention. You're not looking at global capitalism. And this program of austerity that even now are arriving in Europe. Now, for a long time it was happening to these people over there. Now it's arriving to European society. Because effectively capitalism need constant profit. And also you have this capitalism that is against the state and want the state to be its own, agent. And so the state, it pushed the state to abandon a lot of services. And this is happening to Europe also. But it happened first in these places. So civilizational feminism is a tool in the end of capital and imperialism, but has been very smart. As I say, I have studied at one point, for instance, it was very clear, all program of so-called development had to have a chapter on, women. Otherwise, they will not receive funds. Even people told me in the NGO, but Françoise, we need to have, even if we don't do it, because otherwise we will not receive the funds. So it became really a tool in the end of capital and this form of soft, if we could say that, with soft imperialism, not with a gun, but with a savior syndrome.
Yeah, and it has a long story, I guess, because also in the War of Independence in Algeria, it is the same history, like women became a tool, and also this matter of hijab or burqa, it's the same story all the time, yes.
And also, when you were talking about, European feminists kind of looking down at the global South, they also completely forget the tradition of other feminisms, right? Feminist movements or women's movements that particularly in some Arab countries were very much connected to Islam, right? And were very nationalist and very, in a way, inspired by religion. And, obviously we are in Europe, so I was thinking today about this fact that we have this long tradition of color blindness. You talk about how feminism, profited from imperialism and capitalism, and we kind of rarely acknowledge it at school. It's barely mentioned. And this idea that you talked about, that, women's rights applied all over the world, or democracy, right? The Western idea of democracy will be, if it's applied to other places in the world, it will cure, I don't know, all the wrongs, right, in the world, where in fact oftentimes it's just fueled by racism and Islamophobia and so on. But sorry, I wanted to ask you, when Western thinkers, or not even thinkers, scholars, people, and I mean, who are kind of invested in whiteness, just by being born here even, when they are faced with the ideas of decolonial feminism, what do you think is usually the main problem for them? Or what kind of misconceptions they have of decolonial feminism?
Mm-hmm. Again, it's the blindness toward vis-à-vis their own history. I often say that white women did not have many rights in 17th or 18th century, what is called rights, what have been called rights by the West, especially the right to vote, which became a very important struggle for feminists, for women, and of course we are for. But they forget one thing, that white women had one right, regardless of their gender, to own human being. They were at the head of slave plantation, or they had, they own human being, they own personally. And you have this study showing that even they knew very well how to bargain at the slave market and to say, no, we don't want this, or, we bargain. And in some marriage contract, they insisted of keeping the human being they own in their name, and not to the name of their husband. Because, for instance, their father, because they could not inherit the land, the father will give them human beings. And it was capital, and they understood it was capital, because they could bargain with it, or they could rent these people, or sell them, or, or use them. And so they understood private property and capital. They were not like, the poor white women we see in the movie, or, like Gone with the Wind, and, like poor things, drawn by the heat. And so, and this is very important to understand that despite, regardless of their gender, at that moment there was all the ideology of weakness, of this and that, they nonetheless, some of them had the right to own human being. And you never hear them about that, what it meant. Because slavery lasted 4 centuries. what it meant for some of them to own directly capital. And some were lived in Europe. You did not need to live in the colony to own human being. You could invest through your banker, like you invest in whatever you invest today. I'm not talking about us, but what people can do if they invest. You could invest and you could own, human being as capital, against which you will borrow money or you will buy something. So that's very important to trace that history first. Second, effectively, the question, of democracy. And we do see the limit of liberal democracy today with genocide in Gaza, especially. I mean, what people are more and more calling double standard, the life that matter and the life that do not matter. And the kind of panic that the patriarchal white, capital facing all this movement. Black Lives Matter, indigenous people fighting for water and land, Mexican feminists or, feminists in Argentina, like absolutely assaulting, like the site of power to fight. I mean, women fighting with cops, so it's not men and young women fighting. And all this movement in Europe, like fighting for right to abortion, I mean, against effectively fascism, far right, or incredible, Catholic conservatism, and so on and so forth. I mean, as you do know in your own country. So my argument was the global counter-revolution that we are witnessing is the answer to this incredible movement. It's the panicky answer, the need to come back and, redress things. So within that, for white feminists, these white bourgeois feminists who don't want to understand, who want to, in fact, protect that feminism because they get some benefit out of it. Status, social status, they could even, become elected or become invited by, international organization and become suddenly the spokesperson for women's rights and you don't even know where they're coming from. So the problem with whiteness is the fact that effectively they are not confronting whiteness. What is meant to be white? And quite often when, some years ago I had like some young woman, but I am white, what can I do about that? I say, guilt does not matter. Guilt will not help us and will not help you either. And the point is not like whether you were born with that skin color. It's to understand the privilege that this gave you. Mm-hmm. Deep privilege, and how you're going to undo this privilege. So it's not like feeling guilty because that does not help anyone. But effectively, confronting whiteness is not, why do you say that to me? That's terrible, I don't know what to do. You have things to do, but take some risk. That means taking some risk. Undoing your privilege is taking some risk. It's not pretending not to be white, but understanding the story of whiteness already. Why suddenly you had white people in Europe? Why suddenly you had white people? Why whiteness became, effectively the measure of beauty, reason, and intelligence? Why? What happened? And how you do that? Because this has given the incredible, cruel, and brutal world in which we live today. So, do you want to participate, or do you want to have another world than that one? So the main problem with whiteness is whiteness itself. If it looks like something, but it's true. It's whiteness which is the problem. It's not like being white or whatever. It's whiteness in the sense that effectively that ideology, that structural, very strong, protected by law, protected by representation, protected by school, by the coloniality of knowledge, by all this. This is whiteness. It's not, I'm white. No, it's that. Do you participate? Are you complicit with the coloniality of knowledge? Do you make the effort of reading other people than just people from Western Europe? Do you pay attention? Do you effectively, even if you want emancipation, have you read, a theory of emancipation coming from India, coming from the Arab world? Have you tried? It's not translated. Do you fight for them to be translated? Or do you think still that Kant and, Derrida are still, the people that should be read all over the world? You have something that you can do. So do something. You know, and if you read feminists, make, you know, the effort of reading feminists from South America, Central America, from African continent, from Oceania, from Asia, and also within this feminism also the plurality of feminism. So don't talk to me about the African feminism or the Asian feminism. Again, it's plural, because not all women are the same. You know, since when you will have like a group like that, so homogeneous that the first, you know, I don't know. This is impossible. It's absolutely impossible. You do have class, effectively, that will intersect. And you will have also, you know, how you address sexualities and genders. And so that will make you something different. But I will say, yeah, the main problem with whiteness is, with whiteness is whiteness.
And then also after whiteness come like a lot of other concepts, like I was thinking about gender, how, you know, it's also the even I would say the concept of woman, right, and women is in a way very charged by the Western history and the, you know, Western also colonialism and so on. And it's fascinating to think about how in different places all over the world the understanding of gender can be different, and also historically the gender systems might differ.
I mean, effectively, it's a very important thing because gender has become so hegemonic. And you see gender equality, gender empowerment. I don't even understand what that means. You know, sometimes I don't understand. I mean, gender, we use it finally, but sometimes I don't even understand what I'm talking. You know, what our people are talking about. You know, and of course the fact that it's being attacked by the far right and make it, you know, that you want to defend the concept. And of course, we follow, you know, what Judith Butler says, the difference between, you know, the gender, and it's a construct and it's a social construct, has nothing to do with biological gender. But at the end, it's kind of like we have to talk about it endlessly. And sometimes, you know, we will want, no, it doesn't matter, you know, that's one thing. And then also, as you were saying, the very strict construction of gender make us sometimes also not see how a crime will affect people regardless of gender. Okay, I'm thinking, for instance, about rape. Rape is seen first as something that men are doing to women. And it's true. It's massively that. But then, you know, I don't know if you have read this article of Hortense Spiller, Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, an American grammar book. About she make the distinction between body and flesh. And my argument is effectively, regardless of gender, a racialized person is flesh rather than body. And the body will belong to effectively white woman. She will have a body that she has to take care. The black woman will be flesh in the sense of, you know, being, you know, like raped, tortured, sold. But men also. Men. Under slavery, black men were flesh, not body. And so you had, on the one side, the animalization of the black male body, you know, very strong and so on, and on the other hand, make it made into flesh. And when you see today all the report about the systematic rape of Palestinian men in Israeli prison, you ask yourself, what is rape? Should not, as feminists, we should open that notion. And that does not mean that we underestimate that it's first a crime made against women, but we understand how race intervene and how this will be a crime effectively against young trans men, gay men, you know, and not just something in the army, whatever, but largely, they are made into flesh. You know, the young homeless boy, or, you know, like will become flesh and no longer a body. So the question of gender, sometimes we have to be careful about it also, because we, as you were saying, we adopt that division of Western thing, and even we say it's a social construct, but at one point is, you know, but there is also the condition that racial capitalism is producing and transforming some people into flesh.
And as we are speaking about some people who are not visible to other, now I want to ask you about probably one of the most quotable question. It's even on the cover of Polish translation. And the question is, who cleans the world? So could you talk us a little bit about why do you think this question is so important? And also the answer for this question would be for us, I think, very thought-provoking and evocative. So why this is so important?
Yeah, I mean, first, of course, I follow the strike of cleaning women in a hotel in Paris. And at the beginning, on the picket line, you did not have many feminists. The first time I went there, I thought, oh God, we're going to be 100 or 200. No, they were just themselves and me and perhaps one other person. And then it became a feminist. And it made me think the fact that they were telling me what about, what their day job. And I started to think about the women we see sometime in the airport or, railway station. And they are there, like a phantom, like phantomatic presence, and they clean the place while people are just walking around on their own business. So I started to think about this visibility and visibility. And the first article I wrote was about two bodies. The body in the morning, that women and men that you will see running in the street of a city, and then going to the gym or going to the yoga or meditation, and then having an avocado toast, and then going finally to the job, to their work. And I say, for this life to be, for that person, one person to be able, you almost have 10 persons working. The person who grow up the avocado, the one who will do the coffee, and then so I can have a matcha latte with whatever flavor, and then I can do some meditation. And so I started to be interested by all this body, invisible body, that made that just one person. That life, that healthy things. And so the question of health, and that these people who are in fact exploited and so are not even offered the same possibility. So it started like that, and the fact that effectively all the places where also the women, the feminist women, go to, or that make their life possible, the daycare where they drop the kids, the hairdresser where they go, the yoga, the offices, the hospital where they go to see their mother, whatever, have been cleaned by women in the morning, or will be cleaned. And I even say, we could have absolutely radical feminist show, but the gallery would have been cleaned in the morning by some women. So we will do our radical feminism things, but then we will not see that was even made possible because it had been cleaned. So I started to say, okay, behind all this, even behind some of the revolutionary or radical movement, you have in people who have been made invisible and making that possible, making our life possible, and quite comfortable, even for some activists, especially if we are in the global north anyway, but even some bourgeois or some intellectual. So for me, it was this question of who cleaned the world became very important. My argument was like any society, north or south, rests on that work. And I saw it when I travel. It's the same. And women in Maputo, Buenos Aires or Paris will tell you about the similar condition of work. And the exhaustion. So I started also to be interested in the fact how it damaged the body and the mind, how women quite young, they are 40, 45, they have already 3 surgery on their knees. One of them took a early retirement. She was barely 54 when she told me, Françoise, I cannot even take my grandson. I can bring him because I don't have strength in my arm anymore. So it was concrete. It was not about, it's very concrete. The exhaustion of the body, the exhaustion of the mind. A young woman in Spain telling me that they pop up, anti-pain pills very early in the morning. So it's toxic because of the chemical also. So this was incredible, industry, let's say, of making, this body to make that world possible. So I say, okay, that will be a very important question to ask every time. And also in a further work, I look also at the colonial racial division between clean and dirty. What is cleanliness? What is dirtiness? We decide what is clean. Why suddenly Western Europe became the place of cleanliness, and all the industry around cleanliness and the question of smell and what is smelly and how, so all this for me became very important. On the question of visible and invisibility, I also say that the cleaning woman, let's say we're in an hotel or whatever, or even we are in a restaurant somewhere, she is cleaning. We see her, we don't walk through her. We are not in a movie of the invisible woman, but we see her without seeing her. Again, what I said at the beginning, like we are taught to see, so we avoid, but not to see, to make something, out of it, how much she's paid, and how some feminists, for instance, in a gallery or in a museum, in university, will have very radical things and have like incredible salary, and the woman who clean office is paid a tenth of her salary. Why? Who decided that this work has less worth? What is, the social hierarchy and racial hierarchy and gender hierarchy that is being accepted, naturalized? So I do think that we clean the world also is a very important question, and that has to be really made concrete. And the question, for instance, the women doing the strike were asking just for better pay. And some black African-American women in the United States say, don't look down on her, pay us more. Pay us much, much more. So we'll have more time in our life and we will not have to work like 3 jobs just to get like a decent. So it's also the worth of that work. That is why is this work, which is absolutely essential for the functioning of any society, still very gendered and absolutely exploited and underpaid, and a very dangerous work, in fact, for your health and your mind.
Yeah, I'm thinking about also the exhaustion that you mentioned, which is like a very, I would say it has become a symptom of capitalism, right? Everybody is exhausted. I mean, some people, work physically, so it's a different kind of exhaustion, but generally there's this structure of feeling, to borrow a concept of, exhaustion and just not having enough time, not having leisure time. And, well, I guess capitalism also makes the most reproductive or productive work of our society, kind of the work that is necessary for us to, continue as we live. But it, as you said, naturalizes it to be something of a lesser value, or something that we don't get paid for. And of course, the feminist theorists talked also a lot about the reproductive work, right? That women give birth to children and then also take care of the elderly and so on. And it is considered in our society as something totally natural. And while we don't get paid for it, and also capitalism cannot actually function or exist without it, right? Because without the reproduction of people, there's no further society.
For me, the question of exhaustion is very important. It's really, capitalism rests on the extraction of a life force. Again, for me who studied slavery, the life expectancy, if we can say that, was 8 to 10 years on a plantation. Especially, except the United States for different reasons. Not that it was better, but it's because they decided not to stop the trade with African continent in 1808. So the reproduction of the slave and slave population was local. But anyway, so the point is of the exhaustion. Effectively, there is something with colonization and capitalism of exhausting the soil, the environment, opening a mine. Now there is no longer silver or whatever there is, or coal. Or we're going to move further down and we capitalists leave behind a total destructed, wasted environment. So, and there's the same thing with body. The same thing with body. So it's part of that. And on the other side, you have this symptom of the constant high performance, of the person who can work until 3 a.m. in the morning and like run and so on, that the performing body. But that performance is based on what? How many body who will be exhausted so that performing body can perform its, energy and can never exhausted, an energy that never exhausted. So that's again, it's effectively the symptom, a very strong symptom of capitalism. The question, of course, of the reproduction and unpaid work is very important. But I think we could, as feminists, we could also think about bring in the incredible anxiety that you have today among so many governments about the fact that we don't have enough children, there is not enough reproduction, women are not doing anything, what's happening? Women are, on some kind of silent strike. We have got to stop that.
So we give them money, right? As in Poland.
Yeah, we give them money, but at the same time, the life will not be, as if it's a question of money. It's as if it's a question of money. But it's a question also for some young women, do I want to bring a child in that world? And of course, wanting, but then wondering, and, especially with today fascism and militarization everywhere, and asking that question, the question of the environment. And so there is this total now, Macron, the French president, talk about demographic rearmament, rearmament demographic. It's like, what's wrong with you? Who did we ask you? Anything? And then in Argentina, going back on the question of abortion and so on. But that it's really effectively patriarch are unhappy. And I'm glad they are unhappy, because that means that we did something to make them unhappy. But effectively, this question of reproduction has to be, again, we have to think about it as feminists, not bourgeois white feminists, but how we may, and who will be forced, who will be encouraged again to have babies and children in a society that will continue not to have, daycare or, as if just having a child will fulfill entirely your life as a woman or as a person who has a child.
I haven't read the article yet, but someone this morning sent an article to me about it, and it's in Poland, right? So it's about Polish experts, so-called. So basically it said that some Polish experts, some Polish demography experts, because they are so worried about, the population decline, are considering right now the idea of a government-funded Tinder or, dating app, so that, because basically all studies show that, more and more people are single, less people get married, and even less people have children, right? So how do we cure this? There is obviously a problem, quote unquote, of, this heteronormative nuclear family, right? I just think, it's just a little bit funny, a little bit scary, I would say.
Yeah, and anyway, they should ask themselves, why don't we want to have children?
Yeah. No, because...
in this world, do we want to have children in the world that they are producing? Do we want to make children for them, for what they want? To make war, to kill people? So do we want that? Or do we effectively have a certain, a silent strike? And the way in which in the book I wrote about, effectively the womb of women and race and capitalism, I drive that how demography became a very important topic among imperialists, especially the United States, leading the way after World War II. Who will have children? Who will not have children? The birth control campaign, massive birth control campaign, because usually it's the brown and black people who are having too many children, or minorities, could be the Rom, for instance. And in France, for instance, if a Rom woman comes and she's pregnant, quite often, and this was a doctor friend who told me that, she's offered, don't you want to stop to have children? You will not want to have, to be sterilized. That will be good for you, and so on and so forth. So, because, and the white woman will come with a, like a third child, pregnant, will not have this kind of a remark. So this, who is the good mother in the world of these people who want to do like a national Tinder, is effectively, they don't want children. They want to remain patriarch. It's not the same thing. It's not at all. They pretend that they want us to have children. Us, I mean, the people who want to have children. But in fact, what they want is to maintain patriarchy. It's not the same thing at all.
And also this thing that you said about pregnant women coming into the hospital, it's like what you talked about before in the Reunion Island, right? It's basically the same.
The same thing. And there is a report right now also going around about some scientists, men, who are warning us about the fact that humanity could disappear because we are not having enough children to renew humanity. And, unsurprisingly, they say, and we have to pay attention because in Muslim societies, they still have a lot of children. So again, as we started with Islam, was become really, really the point of fixation for the Western world. And, Muslim women and Islam as a really constructed, built as a threat to the white world.
So how do you stay optimistic in this kinds of times where so much is going on? Could you tell us how this is possible?
Well, I have to admit that there are moments, recently with all this victory of the far right and the nakedness of power, of brutal power and cruelty. There are moments, oh my God, how are we going to get out of this? How are we going to get out of this? I mean, we have a very cruel man in power in the United States with the power he has. We have in Argentina, in Italy, in Hungary, in India. There is fascism everywhere. And we have to study against, fascism, not in a way, this is like the 30s. No. And also we have to make the connection between colonialism and fascism, as Aimé Césaire did in Discourse on Colonialism. But also, if we look at the story of Germany, we know that they had the genocide in Namibia before, doing the genocide in Europe. Or we know that Pétain and Franco, crush a revolution in Morocco and then came back to Spain to crush the Spanish Revolution, or to France to collaborate with the Nazi. So we have to make that work. I remain like that because I think my curiosity, I want to understand why it's like that. What's happening? And I think that doing that is very liberatory because then it doesn't look like, some kind of, planet, whatever, going to fall on us, No, these are human beings. These are not Medusa, people you're going to put us into stone just by looking. We can look at the monster because this monster are just mostly men, mostly male, mostly white. And so they are just, human beings. But they are effectively what we have to understand, that what is that meanness and that cruelty? What is going on? And we have to look at their program and their project and their desire to build more and more enclave. Like place, like bunker, in which they will live. And outside people can, just die by thousand and by million. It's a real fascistic dream, very male. And so we have to pay attention to that. And as I say, to see also the limit of order that was put by the United States at the end of World War II, and that presented democracy, as you were saying, for the solution to all wrong. But it was their democracy. It was their love. And I remember when there was an invasion of Ukraine, there was a lot of talk in Western Europe about the peace, that we have been living in peace and now there is no peace. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, 45 people did not stop in the Global South to be, armed intervention, coup d'etat, like wars. You never stop. You could not allow people to be free. You could not allow people to be sovereign. That was impossible. From Iran, you had to intervene just because Mossadegh wanted to nationalize, oil production. You intervene in Central America. You intervene in South America. You supported all the military dictatorship. You did not. Apparently, the fact that Spain, Portugal, and Greece were under military dictatorship or fascistic regime did not, disturb you because they were there until the mid-70s. So what is the Europe you're talking about? What is this Europe? What is it? And how do we confront that lie so we do not fall into also in kind of or cynicism? We still think that something is possible, and in fact that we have to fight. We saw that even international law, which is supposed to at least, intervene and make us believe that there will be some justice, and we see there is none. The impunity of criminal everywhere is, what is justice? Where is it? Where is it? So I think we are at a moment of extreme danger and extreme opportunity, because it absolutely requires us to think and to analyze, and to perhaps use some of the analysis in the past, but renew it, because there are new weapons in the hand of capitalists and imperialists. There are new weapons. But especially the impunity, the fact that the naked power also was really questioned. And again, I will say that that brutality is because they know that things are shifting, and that idea of Western civilization and superior civilization and white supremacy is really, really falling. There is a decline, and they cannot stand it. I see it in Western Europe. I mean, the panic about the fact that they will no longer be on the top, and that they have to accept to live with others who are different from them, who don't, and that they cannot impose their language, their culture, their view of the world. And that panic provokes that cruelty. But at the same time, they are losing. They are losing. But it will be a long battle. But it's also absolutely interesting to say. Just one thing I wanted to say, I was interviewing old activists in Réunion Island. I was there for end of September to mid-November, who had been anti-colonial activists. Some of them went to jail, have been beaten. And I said, but at the end, what it was for you to be, And they told me, joy, Françoise. It was joy. And I say, okay, joy. Mm-hmm. Struggle is also joy. It's a lot of tears, for comrades who fall, but it's also joy. And this is what they don't have. The enemy, do you see them being joyous? They have no imagination, no joy. We have imagination and joy. That's a lot.
I was thinking about the question about emotions during this decolonial work, but I think you said it perfectly right now. So my question would be about Algeria, because you spent part of your education in Algeria, a country that has gone through and also in some ways still going through the process and experience of decolonization. And this is, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, it is my theme of my topic of my doctoral dissertation. So it would be very interesting for me to know a little bit about your opinion on this country and on this experience of decolonization. So as we know, during the independence, the War of Independence, Algerian women, they experience some significant changes in their life, in this social position in Algerian society. So we can say also the struggle was not only against the colonizer, but also the struggle was a form of liberation for those women. However, as we know, society quickly forgot these changes, and during the later civil war, Décennie Noire, so it will be Black Decade, we saw that this rise of radical Islam was not good for Algerian women, and they faced severe violence. So I would like to ask how we can think and describe this landscape of Algeria, which is not easy to describe, I guess, and also this position of Algerian women without falling into stereotypes like poor, oppressed Arab woman, and so on.
Well, it's okay. I will not want to speak for Algerian women or for Algerian, but what I will say is how decolonization is a difficult process because it's in fact constantly hindered by the West. As I said before, I mean, the West has never accepted full sovereignty and full freedom. And all the attempt by the Global South through the Tricontinental or the South-South project, it started with Bandung in 1955, and there was all this attempt, and whatever we think of them, they were not totally, perhaps not, or we would have wanted more or whatever, they were there. They wanted something else, and they were constantly crushed. So there is also what made, the impossibility of Algeria to develop itself by itself fully and to be constantly attacked. And also, of course, you have within Algeria forces that are conservative. I mean, Aban Ramdan or Labib Ben Miri, who were leaders in the Algerian independence, warned about it. They say, they wanted this. The program of the Congress of the Sumam was to fight for a democratic and socialist Algeria with what socialist meant, right? Not what the West think, following some experiences, but effectively sovereignty about the resources, sovereignty about the kind of education, and it never happened. So we have also to look at the same time the incredible struggle that they did, and they won. And this, the French can never forgive them. We see even to now in 2025, you have like ministers or, leaders, political leaders in France still, after French Algeria, you want to tell them, okay, this was, you lost in 1962, get a grip, it's done. Algeria will never be again a colony. So we see on the one side the strengths of the colonial desire for domination and for owning people. Islamophobia, of course. Anti-Arab racism, very strong in the West. And then effectively a woman, but we could say also peasant, and we could say, a lot of, classes or group of community are not really fully able to intervene. We have this incredible movement, Iraq, for incredible, absolutely massive movement, and that was crushed. So I will see also we have to pay attention to development of struggle within country. When the West, for instance, say, we were, democratic forever. I mean, excuse me, France went through how many republics, and how many, and collaborated with the Nazi, for during World War II, and then did a lot of colonial wars. Like, who are you, to give lesson? So this development of the Algerian society by itself will be certainly, we'll have, why it's so. But we can talk about so many other countries. I want to avoid effectively, there is nothing. These people cannot, build a society. No, they are doing it. It will take time because it's internal conflict, as Ben Midi, Aban Ramdan, but also Fanon already, saw, with, the betrayal of the national bourgeoisie, but also external forces. We know that, for instance, the European community give money to Morocco and Tunisia and Libya to kill migrants so they do not reach Europe. This is a European community. And then the European community will say, this regime are, authoritarian regime. But who, supported it? You are supporting it. You want that world. You want a world with dictators. You want a world with authoritarian leaders rather than that fully democratic. Because otherwise you will not have intervened in the middle of people, doing their own choice through a military coup. CIA is here, Secret Service over there or whatever, to stop effectively the freedom and sovereignty. And this is very important. So I will say, of course, you have Islam as a source of strength for people, and if effectively for some French people, they thought that the fight for independent Algeria was like their own revolution. But Islam played an important role. Arab language played an important role. One country, Algeria, one language, Arabic, one religion, Islam. That was the first, idea of nationalism circulating at the beginning of 20th century through the countryside. So, Islam can be effectively a source of liberatory emancipation to a certain extent for, people in Europe who still think that, religion. But if we don't pay attention to the role of religion, also as a liberating, as a source of emancipation and liberation, then we will fall into the kind of secularism, imperial, colonial secularism of especially France, but also the British were a little like that. So I will say, well, we have to read the Algerian, we have to listen to them, to the women and the men. We have to pay attention to what they say and not look at it filtered through Western desire for Algeria to fail, really for good. It's extraordinary. I mean, for me, it was very important. This year was the 100th anniversary of the ransom imposed by the French state on Haiti, because Black Republic should not exist. It was impossible. It was such an attack on the world of slavery at the time in 1804 that it could not. So there were blockers, ransom, then occupation by the US. And then they can say, oh, look at this country. They cannot have peace. It's chaos. They produce the chaos. They want to remain, they want this cartography of the history that this is the world of human right. This is a world of freedom, individual freedom, of women's right. And this is chaos. All this, the rest of it is chaos. And I'm not saying that you don't have internal forces in these places that do, but I will say if Europe, if the West has perhaps put less, intervention and so on, you will have left, because we will never know what Iran would have been. We will never know what Haiti could have been. We will never know what Tunisia could have been, and so on and so forth, because it was stopped. So now they have to go through, also what the West, in fact, produce.
Speaking of Western productions, we were thinking, because obviously in, the countries that had colonies, like you mentioned, of course, France and Great Britain, there is this issue with keeping the colonial history alive, right? This is a history that is oftentimes swept under the rug, and that is one of the problems that, these, I would say, societies have to deal with. But we kind of wanted to ask you from our standpoint in Poland, where we did not, as far as I know, actively participate in colonialism or directly, because we know that we tried to have colonies, but, well, it didn't happen in the end. But we still live in a world that is shaped by these colonial relations. And, for example, we consume a lot of American culture, right? So, I don't know, we recently watched the 3rd season of The White Lotus, right? Which is exactly about that, and especially the first season for me was particularly interesting because it happens in Hawaii, and maybe you have some ideas, but of course we touched upon this when we were talking about whiteness, but how societies outside of this traditional colonizer versus decolonized power should cultivate decolonial awareness and practice responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as you say, whether a country has directly or indirectly contributed, we live in a world that has been shaped by that, so directly or indirectly. And the indirectly has to be also looked at how Poland benefited indirectly, and this is, to look at how Poland benefited from whiteness, and how becoming European is in fact also becoming white now. Becoming part of the European community is in fact becoming white. That the price or the condition, let's say, to become citizen of Europe is you have to be anti-migrant, you have to participate in anti-migrant policy. And here in Poland, the police participated in, stopping migrants from Belarus in 2023, I think, was in 20.
It's still going on.
It's still going on. So, that was also Europe, the European community as it's constructed, demand condition to be part of Europe. Beside the question of democracy, democratic right, and so on and so forth, it also, will you enforce the policy of European community, which is neoliberalism, less social laws, more exploitation of workers, anti-migrant policies, and then we can let you, harass women and gays and queer. We will sometimes say, we don't like it, so forth, but as long as you participate in that. So the question of colonialism is not the direct colony, that you have a direct colony. But of course, France, Great Britain, Germany, and the United States and Canada and Australia are really the land of the white, right? And especially when you look at United States and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, they were democracy after Western democracy. And usually they present themselves are more free because they did not have to free themselves from, absolute monarchy. So they are better. They were all built on genocide. All of them built on genocide. And in Poland, what have been also the racist ideology that are perhaps constituted something that contributed to the construction of the Polish identity. Anti-Semitism, anti-Rom, whatever. So how even if you are not a direct colonial power, you are nonetheless, you're permeated, the ideology of colonialism has penetrated because you want to belong to the world of whiteness, because otherwise you will not want to go in Europe or on other conditions. You will want to have a Europe of solidarity, of openness, of, effectively defending rights, but not, in the way. So I will say, what is the decolonization in decolonizing practices in Poland, which are not about the colonial story? Because it's not just about the colonial story. Because it continues after even the end, whatever, of the colony. Great Britain had practically no empire anymore. It remains. So my point is it's not enough because decolonial, we live effectively in a world that is under colonial principle and practices and ideologies. And Poland does not escape that. So the participation of the decolonization is to participate in the struggle for liberation. And it's not about, we don't have a colony, so we don't have, to liberate, to contribute to the liberation of colony. But we have to contribute, we can contribute as person living in Poland to effectively the abolition of regime and structure that are structure of denial and structure of absolutely violation of rights, and also of destruction of the environment, of effectively climate disaster. And Poland will not escape that, There is no reason. There is, the illusion that because we don't have colonies, we are not concerned is a total illusion. And it's not just because, as I say, historically this has been shaped, because capitalism today, which is connected like that with colonization, with the principle of colonization, will destroy the world. And will destroy Poland and the people living in Poland. Poland will not escape, will not be protected because it did not have a colonial empire. Because the world we live in, the increased criminalization of dissent, increased militarization, is a world that there is no way. And the way also neoliberalism built, what kind of work will be there, or the financialization. Poland does not escape that. And how many, some of the country of the former Eastern Europe, as Western Europe was calling this country, or have to go to Western Europe to find work, to find a job. And they are discriminated, but they are nonetheless above the black and brown people. Mm-hmm. So and decolonization will mean I will refuse to take advantage of my whiteness. I will participate in the decolonial struggle, because the decolonial struggle is not in the former colony or current colony. How Europe, the decolonization of Europe and the country in Europe, is effectively to get rid of the way in which the world was shaped, not only in the colonial time, but, as I insist, after World War II. Because we live under, the new world order, no longer the French and the British. That was done in 1945. This is a United States order. So, and Poland live under that, and that order was International Monetary Fund, World Bank, World Trade Organization, all this that absolutely impose a certain way of living and a certain economy that necessarily rests on increased poverty and destruction of the environment.
Well, I hope these last words of yours in this conversation will maybe wake up our listeners a little bit. But Professor Françoise Vergès, thank you so much for coming here. This was a fascinating conversation that I wish I could continue, but I think, yes, it's a little bit late in the evening already. And tomorrow you will be giving your lecture in the morning. So, but thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
This was an episode of NeoTalk, the official podcast of the Faculty of Modern Languages at the University of Warsaw, recorded at Radio Campus. Franek Wójcicki edited this episode, and the cover art is by Weronika Rosik. You can find additional resources and books mentioned in the show notes. We encourage you to follow the Department of Modern Languages on Instagram and Facebook. If you have comments, questions, or suggestions for topics we could cover, email us. My name is Maria Łusakowska. Thanks for listening.